You're muted.
I'm sorry. We're going to probably have to change up some of the agenda items because we need to wait for Lisa to show up from another meeting.
Okay. All right, well, you want to pull it up? Did we get the minutes out in time? You're muted, Michael.
Sorry. Yeah, we sent the minutes out last, I think it was on Friday.
Okay, I apologize. I'd seen the earlier version. All right, motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, minutes are passed. Thank you. All right. Any liaison updates?
Are you on?
We have anything on budget in particular?
John, I have one for AC for ACTC, but I need a moment before I'm ready to do that.
I think we might have lost John, so let's give him a little bit of time to return here. John, did you make it back?
This is like the Twilight Zone for poor John.
Yes, this is, if they revisited the Twilight Zone, I'm sure this would be a very good episode.
All right, well, maybe while John is trying to get back in, do we have liaison updates that we want to go through? Okay. Because I think Dee Dee was our back liaison, right? And she's not on.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, do we want to just start on certified air cleaning devices with Jim while John comes back into the mix?
One more thing, didn't Adam Rasmussen say he had an ACTC update but needed a little time, I think?
Yeah, Adam, do you want to will the 5 minutes it takes us to do the air cleaning give you the time you need to get ready?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Meikle will not be joining us this evening. Instead, this item will be covered by our interim assistant superintendent, Kathy Lynn. Take it away, Kathy.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to meet you. So the status of the CACDs are they have been installed in all our schools, including our secondary schools. The remaining CACDs we have to install for this week are just some of the small special education pullout rooms that were identified just about a week and a half ago that they had made additional requests just because these students may be meeting one-on-one with a teacher and they cannot wear masks. So we have provided additional CACDs for these special pullout rooms, and they should be all installed by the end of this week, according to Jim. But all the other classrooms, all the secondary schools, their CACDs have been delivered and installed.
Can I ask a question? So what was the final decision? Was it one per room, or were some classrooms getting two if needed?
So most classrooms received one, and those that needed it to meet the 4 to 6 air changes per hour received two.
Yeah, this is Chip. I have a few questions about this as well. So if we're just chiming in, my questions, just to follow up on that real quick, Kathy, you said most. Is it most or all? I guess is my first question. And then secondly, when this whole thing started, there was this discussion of 1,300 classrooms. I've taken a look at the recent documents and it's then bounced up to 1,700 classrooms and now it's at 1,500. So I am just curious what is, the delta there and what, can you just speak to that delta and are they rooms that aren't classrooms or are closed classrooms that aren't being used or what? There's just a lot of numbers. And so I'm just curious if you can speak to those different deltas.
I'd be glad to. So I believe when this had first started last summer and when CMTA was hired to do an analysis of our schools, they looked at the classrooms in the same time, Michael was working on the return to school classroom capacity for each school. So he worked with each individual school's administration staff, and they identified which classrooms would be available for students when they return to an in-person hybrid capacity. So they were starting to work with that list first. And then during that time, CMTA was tasked to look at the classrooms to see if they met the ventilation design based on ASHRAE. With those two approaches, there's a lot of different numbers involved because CMTA focused on the ASHRAE guidelines first prior to new guidelines coming out and Harvard recommending it based on their 4 to 6 air changes per hour. So that's why the numbers varied. In the end, because Michael had looked at every classroom and the classroom capacity, his total came out to, I believe, 1,777 classrooms that were posted online for the return to school classroom capacity, where each school identified those rooms that they would be bringing in students. Because of that, we asked CMTA to revisit those classrooms to see which classrooms would need one CACD and which ones would need more than one in order to meet the 4 to 6 air changes per hour. So that's how the numbers changed, as we kind of looked at guidance, readjusted, and looked at and received more input from the community regarding the updated guidance from Harvard. So that's kind of where we stood right now. And then we actually ordered additional ones, like I said, for the special education pullout rooms that were not identified in the return to school classroom capacity matrix. So that's why the numbers have changed during kind of as we did the presentation and the return to school. And we have asked CMTA to kind of revisit based on input and, additional guidance.
Okay, so you're up to 1,700 or so now, 1,760, I think you said, and it sounds like there are CACDs in each of those 1,760, and then just like you said, if there's a second one necessary or the special ed room, or I'm sorry, a room where the instructors can't, or people can't wear their masks, then that's another pocket of rooms. So to
Right,
speak.
and this is
Okay.
just to meet the 4 to 6 air changes with the outside air ventilation that comes in from the mechanical equipment, as well as from the CACD. So that doesn't include any outside air ventilation that comes in from windows that, staff is allowed to open where it's safe to do so, to bring in more outside air ventilation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? I think we have John Giambalvo back.
Yes, thank you.
All
I can't get my camera on, but I am here. I'm not sure what's going on, but yes, thank you.
All right, so I think we're covered on the CACD conversation unless anyone else had anything. Okay, and then I think Adam was going to go through the ACTC update before we move on.
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So a number of things. We met last week, and as you all know, we're in return to school. They've got about 4,400 students routed, and they say that it's not perfect, but they're probably about 85-90% there. They're making adjustments. There's been some changes to elementary dismissal that is impacting how they're doing the routes home. But I don't know how it's going this week. Well, I haven't had this week yet because it's tomorrow before it starts. But last week was going pretty well. Let's see. There's a shortage of crossing guards because a lot of crossing guards either retired or had to find new jobs during the pandemic. So they're down about 12 positions. They've posted job postings for it, stuff like that, but they're working with the police department to cover areas that are short on for crossing guards. Let's see, Vision Zero. There's a couple of temporary infrastructure projects that they're working on. Lorcombe Lane, there's a missing sidewalk and using bollards for the bike lanes and temporary reflective marking lines to do crosswalks. And then Collins Springs, I think they just finished a project where they're expanding the sidewalks from South Harrison to Fifth Road South. That was a welcome change because there's a lot of issues with walking to school for Collins Springs and for Kenmore. And then the last one is, I also have two more, Nellie Custis and Military Road, which is a very difficult intersection. They're trying to use some bollards and wheel stops to lessen the curve and slow people down. They're going to see how it goes, and if they're able to have some change impact on that one. And then finally, Dorothy Ham. They're working on a signal versus a roundabout test, and then trying to teach residents to put their trash cans in the right place. It's not blocking the walking path. So problems like that. Let's see. So county project. They're working on a construction project across from Glebe Elementary School with the signal. And then same thing, Jamestown, I believe they're also a signal issue. And I mentioned the Dorothy Ham pilot for the roundabout. Construction will not start until April. And then finally, George Mason and Henderson is a signal rebuild project. And then the final area I wanted to bring up was we've been having at each meeting a discussion about a problem intersection. We're calling it better know an intersection. And the one we talked about this time was Wilson and George Mason, which is right near ATS with the McDonald's on the one corner. And this has been a problematic intersection for a while due to all the different the traffic and the fact that the Bluemont bike trail comes up and then you have to cross two sides to get to the rest of the bike trail. And so they did make some changes a couple of years ago. The most problematic area is the southeast corner, which is right, there's a house there. It is a very shallow sidewalk in that position. And so it's difficult to be able, especially with bikes, be able to fit people on those corners. And so there wasn't really a solution that came up, but they're considering some options, including Barnes called a Barnes dash, where you actually allow a diagonal crossing of the intersection. So that's one possibility to consider to allow the bikes to go diagonally across. And there were some other ideas brought up about using different kinds of poles so that you don't have to have light poles on every corner, but no definite or short-term solution for that one. And I guess that's it. Oh, one final one was Kirkwood Road. They're doing a speed and traffic test on Kirkwood at North 17th Street to look at the possibility of doing some different crossings for students who will be going to Science Focus from the east of Kirkwood.
Adam, there's a
Yep.
question from David about when you say that AC is working on the Glebe and 18th intersection, what phase are they in?
Okay, note. The construction starts on March 15th.
Okay, thank you. Dave, did you have anything else?
No, that's good. I was just curious who, I think I missed the very beginning of your discussion, Adam. You were talking, who did you get these updates from, or that this was a meeting that you participated in?
Oh, this is a meeting. This is the ACTC Arlington, what's it called?
Oh, yeah, the ACTC, yes, I know.
Yeah,
Right. Arlington, the
Transportation Choices.
Transportation
Arlington
Commission
County.
meeting, yeah. Gotcha.
It's a joint, there's people from schools and from county on it. So
Right,
it's
right.
kind of like JFAC for transportation.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Are we still getting electric powered buses? Do you know?
That did not, that came up a couple meetings ago. I do think, trying to think what the latest on that one was. There was some issues with funding, but I can't remember what they were now. But I will find out.
Kathy,
Unless someone else knows.
I think Kathy can respond, and then Chip has a question.
Yes, so we were offered 2 electric buses for this year's Dominion's pilot program, but we did not accept the 2 buses due to some budget considerations we have this year. So we are still kind of in a wait and see mode to see how well their pilot program goes, and maybe we'll revisit that in the future.
All right, thank you. Chip?
Thanks, John. Hey, Adam, is there like a list or some type of identification of the intersections that the group is looking at? Like, I know at one point, folks down in South Arlington were told that Glebe and Walter Reed would get looked at one point. So I'm just curious, is there a list that they're starting with, or how does that all work? I'm just curious.
Yeah, there is a list that was compiled. I don't think we have a specific order. I think for each meeting, they are working through which intersection they're going to do because they need this. They need staff to take a look at it, and so when we have the discussion, they come informed. So if you want, I can look up what the plan is for the next few sessions. I mean, we've only got 2 left this year, so I'll find out what the 2 are for May and then June.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Anything else on this topic? All right, we're going to move along unless there's anyone else, other liaisons that want to report. Okay. Jeff, take it away.
All right, good evening. I'm going to, I just realized that I had some information missing, but I just pulled something up to fill in for the blank for right now. Hang on until I bring this up, but I'm going to start with the CIP progress as to where we are on the CIP. And essentially we have 4 items that we are looking at. Let me get this up here for you. All right. So we are looking at the ventilation cost study is the one item that we're looking at. We're looking at the kitchen and security entrance cost study for 8 schools, which is essentially kitchens, and then there's 3 of those buildings, I believe it is, has security entrances as well. Then we're looking at 7 projects for just security entrances, and then the Heights building, the phase 2 study. So I'll start at the beginning with the ventilation study. And what I missed there was I don't have the list of schools. So FYI, we are looking at Abingdon, Arlington Traditional, Ashlawn, Barcroft, Dorothyham, Drew, Gunston, Jamestown, Jefferson, Montessori, Taylor, Swanson, Wakefield, Washington Liberty, Williamsburg, Hoffman Boston, Barrett, Long Branch, and Oak Ridge. So that's 19 schools that we are currently looking at. Essentially, CMTA has surveyed all of these facilities to assess the ventilation performance, and they're proposing strategies to maximize the air quality for return to in-person learning, and also for the long-term needs of these facilities. Ventilation assessment is based on current recommendations from ASHRAE and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and the CDC. and we are targeting ventilation standards at 4 to 6 air changes per hour per classroom space. The evaluation process identified how many of the occupants the current ventilation designs in each school would optimally support. And the evaluation was done by as-built documents, maintenance records, and information from the BAS. Of the classrooms evaluated in 38 schools, a majority will support design occupancy, 25 students and 1 teacher. 16 schools had rooms that would only support hybrid learning, 13 students and 1 teacher, or would not even support the hybrid learning model based on existing ventilation. The ventilation cost study looks at improving indoor air quality at 16 schools, plus 3 more for which HVAC system equipment is nearing the end of its useful life. That's how we got to the 19 that we are currently looking at. And the majority of those 19 are older facilities that are not designed to the current building code standard for ventilation. Essentially what we're doing is we are providing concept level design options for bringing all the deficient classrooms up to the current code for ventilation. To date, they have provided designs for 11 facilities, and all designs are due by mid-March. Essentially, we're trying to look at a low, medium, and high cost options. So we're looking at multiple options for each facility. And then we are doing what is called conceptual cost estimating based on the narrative, the square footage, and all of those things, essentially trying to get a reasonable cost estimate for the options to be looked at. So we are actually having Downey Scott, which is a cost estimator, doing a estimate, and we also have one of our term contractors, MVP, is also doing an estimate, and then we will be reconciling between those 2 estimates to get the best number that we can based on the options that we are looking at. To date, cost estimates have been provided by both entities for 4 facilities, and the first reconciliation took place on Monday, March 1st. We are working on this in phases to basically improve the efficiency of what we're looking at and how we're putting the numbers together. It took us a couple weeks to get those first 4 resolved and making sure everybody is looking at the projects in a similar fashion and making sure our cost estimates are covering the work that we anticipate that would be needed to be done within the facility. And we use both estimators to try to make sure we are not missing anything in these cost estimates. So we are targeting having the cost estimates completed by the 24th of March. And we are targeting the reconciliation of all facilities on or about the 26th of March. So this is moving forward. As I said, we are looking at multiple options based on the recommendations by CMTA, essentially how we could fix the problem in multiple different ways. And again, essentially fixing the section of in a building where it's just a section. We can look at fixing a section of the building. We can look at bringing in just fresh air, or we can look at replacing the entire system. And then we're going to look at, we're going to also have CMTA put together recommendations based on the systems that are in the building that we are looking at with regard to longevity, life cycle, et cetera, to try to recommend for the board to have additional information beyond cost as to how to prioritize, because I doubt we will be able to do all 19 facilities at one time.
Yes. A couple of questions. One from Colleen saying, noting that since Dunstan just went through a major overhaul, why does that still need additional work? And a couple of questions after that.
You kind of gargled. Which one, Gunston?
Dunstan, because it just went through a major overhaul.
One of the things that has been done in the past and was done on that school is we replaced equipment with equipment in kind. So basically we took worn out pieces of equipment and replaced it with new pieces of equipment that met the standard of the original piece of equipment. So that's the reason. Essentially, it's a lesson learned. I think we should never replace in kind. We should always bring up to current codes and standards. I believe that decision was made based on cost, or the first cost. Essentially, one of the biggest things with air and ventilation is it's not just the equipment, it's also the ductwork all has to be changed. And I know in Gunston, for instance, we were trying to do that work over, or do it over 2 summers and be provide as little disruption as possible to the learning environment. And hindsight, that probably was not the best choice to do. We probably should have upsized all of the ductwork within the building when we did that, and replaced all the equipment with larger equipment to provide more ventilation. So again, I think that we were doing what has been done in the district for years, just replacing the equipment as it goes bad, which does not require full design, full permitting, etc. We're just replacing in kind, so it's considered maintenance rather than redesign.
Okay. We have, I think you partially answered Chip's question. He was asking whether code allows for a replacement like that, and you're saying it's maintenance, not a replacement, actually.
Correct.
And then Steve asking about how do you consider energy efficiency with the HVAC
John,
upgrade?
it looks like you're trying to talk, but you can't, maybe. Am I the only one that can't hear John?
No, I heard John.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so the question from Steve is, how are you considering energy efficiency with the HVAC upgrades?
We are always looking at energy efficiencies in what we're doing. I think as you increase the amount of ventilation in any of these facilities, you are reducing the amount of energy efficiencies that you have, because you're bringing in more fresh air. So we do look at that on everything that we do, and we do. I'll let Kathy Lynn jump in if she wants to. I saw her camera going on.
Yeah, so as we have gone through this pandemic for this last year, we have learned about the outside air ventilation requirements, what public health experts really feel like are good targets for outside air ventilation for healthy buildings, which is really not the ASHRAE guidelines right now that our commercial buildings follow. So in terms of energy efficiency, which is a good question, bringing in more outside air will not be as energy efficient. And so we really have to balance that with regards to our healthy building requirements. So will there be an energy cost? Yes, there will be an energy cost to increasing our outside air ventilation. There has to be. If you look at our hospitals and laboratories, which have increased outside air ventilation because of their infectious control requirements in their spaces, they are not Energy Star certified. They are not, LEED buildings, things like that, because of their requirements to make sure their spaces can control infections. So as we learn and understand our new requirements for outside air, it will definitely impact the approach for energy efficiency building design.
Thank you. I've got a question from Heather, but let me go to Chandy because it's directly on point for now. When is the expected completion of this, and will it impact a full return to school 5 days a week?
This is actually a longer term. This will be going to the board for consideration with regard to this summer's CIP. This is not, some of this can be looked at depending on what the costs are and the values are. The board may elect to do whatever they want to do as they want to do it. So I can't say that it will be limited, but essentially the purpose of what we're doing is to look at the long-term fixes for the systems and equipment that we have. And again, I think the recommendations that CMTA makes will be taken into account with regard to the issues and concerns. But some of these fixes themselves will take multiple years within a building to do. So again, the timing, we will be looking at putting a time that it will take to do the work, and then the board will have to evaluate it and look at when do they want to plan to do the work.
So I'll follow on with Jeff's answer, is that I think the question was, what does it look like for a full return? So the target of 4 to 6 air changes per hour in a classroom is for full return, for full student capacity. So if you look at the Harvard School of Public Health return to school guidelines, they don't mention capacity. It's not a hybrid capacity they're saying for 4 to 6 air changes. It's full in person, 4 to 6 air changes. And our goal and intent during this process is to achieve 4 to 6 right now, even though we're just in a hybrid capacity. So with these certified air cleaning devices in our spaces, in September or August, we would be ready to welcome every student back with the CACDs as Jeff's team looks to improving the mechanical ventilation of our schools.
Kathy, thanks. It's Chandy. I had one follow-up question then. So are you saying that the soonest we could expect to have the kids return 5 days a week full-time, I'm just being optimistic, would be this fall because of the air ventilations that we need to procure and implement?
Well, I know, I think that we have, if we're meeting 4 to 6, which we say we are with these CACDs, we could bring in students now full-time, except that some of the other guidelines we haven't met yet, according to what the school division has set forth with regard to social distancing, the 6-foot distancing and things like that. But with regard to ventilation, if we are following the Harvard School of Public Health 4 to 6 air changes per hour, we are meeting that right now with the CACDs we have in our classroom.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve has a follow-up asking about whether you use energy recovery ventilators. He says they cost more, but do not have the same energy penalty as direct ventilation.
So some of our schools already use energy recovery units, ERUs. I know Washington Liberty has several that support their larger spaces, their larger volume spaces. So I believe CMTA will look at all the different units and their capacity and how it serves the needs of the spaces and the schools to determine kind of the best trade-off. And like Jeff said, they're looking at different cost options. So I think they will consider that too. So thank you.
And Chip has his hand raised.
Thanks, John. So, you know, I think that's great to hear, Kathy, that the CACDs will basically provide the bridge to getting kids back in the classrooms, right, at regular capacity, or capacity was at whatever it was, you know, pre-COVID or whatever it's going to be post-COVID. But this brings up, I think, another big point in question is why, I guess not why is not the right question, but what is going to be done to then look at these older schools that, you know, frankly are in need of a lot of other things, you know, to get back to, or to get further equalized with some of their peers, right, in a number of ways. I'm assuming that the discussion is going to happen at some time very soon, whether or not it's time to do something more to that building, whether it's demolish it or renovate it for the future, you know, obviously, as opposed to, you're not going to put a new HVAC system in a school you're going to tear down in 5 years, right? So when I know I'm looking into the future here, but it seems like that discussion, and maybe that's more for us, John, that discussion needs to happen in correlation with a lot of this, unless folks think differently. But it seems like we should be looking at both, since we do seem to have a bridge strategy to get the air somewhat equalized at all our schools.
So that's a good question, Chip, and this relates to a question I was going to ask a little bit broader. Whether we're talking about redoing, upsizing ductwork, or replacing HVAC systems, updating HVAC systems, or doing anything like Chip's talking about, other renovations to schools. A year ago, we were thinking a CIP prior to COVID was swing space, vacating schools for a year and a half, basically renovating and adding on to some schools. That's off the table for a number of reasons right now. Is anything we're talking about for HVAC, will it require, Jeff, you talked about minimizing impact on education. Will anything require a shutting of a school or a shutting of a wing or anything like that? Or if we don't know, that's fine. But an issue we have is we don't have other space to move kids to right now.
Yeah, we've recognized that at this point we don't have places to move kids, and we also don't know what's going to happen post-COVID with regard to capacities. Will they go up? Will they go down? Will they stay flat? We don't know the answer to the question, but we do know that right now that we really have no place to just take an entire school of kids and move them into another facility. So all of the estimating that we are currently doing is being based on number one, phasing it, or summers, as we had done Gunston. It's just that we would probably have more summers to do the work that we needed to do. So it's all being designed and estimated to be looking at it as a phased project, which would be the most costly way to do it. If, for instance, we did find swing space and we were able to empty a school and move kids around, it shouldn't cost more to do it that way than it will with the phase. So the intent and the purpose of what we're doing with this CIP study is to basically have a cost that's reasonable and realistic for the work that is envisioned so that the board can make decisions. We will also have it escalated out for more than 10 years so that they can look at what that impact is for spreading the work on 19 buildings, say, over 20 years or 10 years or whatever.
Does this instead then argue strongly for swing space, so that you could vacate schools for however months instead of spreading it over all these summers?
I think it's something that could be considered. Again, we're looking at it in this particular fashion. There are a lot of these facilities that, depending what option is taken, it is realistic to do it over summers.
Yeah.
There are some big projects, and some of our older buildings, we do need a complete mechanical system. But I don't know that we would be able to empty middle school, for instance, at this point in time. So we would be looking at that as a phased construction. So we have to look at it that way at this point in time. But could we modify that down the road if that option became available? Absolutely. But we should have the funds available to do what needs to be done.
Do you run into project management problems where if you're talking about 19 schools, and so instead of doing one a summer or two a summer, and you've got to do 4 a summer to get something done in the next 5 years, 4 years? Whereas if you had swing space, you could basically, I don't know how long they would take if you had this whole school to yourself. You vacate a school for 4 months, and then the next school and the next school. So do you get into project management issues in terms of having to do too many projects over summers rather than lining them up in sequential order?
There's always a lot of issues with regard to that. You want to have a reasonable amount that you're working on, and it's from our staff standpoint. We have consultants that we could utilize to bring in. We're currently utilizing a CMA to provide us with staff that assist with some of the projects we're currently working on. That's not the issue. The issue becomes when you start doing multiple projects within APS, for instance. You have to look at the subcontractor market. You have to look at the contractor market and who's available. And summer blitz work can be very trying on our contractors that we typically utilize. Or that we trust their work, so to speak.
Right.
This is going to be bid work. Just getting them lined up. You really have to work diligently to make sure you get the right people, having them available. If we don't have people available to bid the work, we have to be careful on when we release the work to be bid. So we will be looking at all of those issues as we would move forward. But we would find a way to do it, however the board would elect to have us do it.
Okay. And a somewhat broader question. We talked last year, I think we raised the inflation rate for construction projects from maybe it was 3 to 4%. I can't remember exactly what it was, or 4 to 5%. Not just HVAC, but what are you seeing now? We haven't talked about this for a few months in terms of.
We are talking about it with all of the estimators that we're currently working with. I don't have anything definitive yet. We will once we put these numbers together, because again, it's everything is a moving target. Based on what we've gotten mostly from our estimators is our first year could be as high as 6%. Because of steel, aluminum, and other issues that would be affected based on current problems or current market pressures. But they also don't see it being as high as it was extending it out. So I don't have the answer yet, but we are looking at that. We are taking advice from all of the cost consultants that we typically utilize. And we're reconciling that as well as we are the costs that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. I think Chip, you were answered. Okay, go Chip. You have a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just curious what did Gunston cost for the HVAC system there? I'm just curious because that was a full. Obviously, you didn't do a few things there, right? From the need to go back, but what did that cost?
Chip, I would have to go back and look it up. I don't have that on the top of my, essentially we managed that for maintenance, but I don't remember what the actual cost was. I'd have to look that up.
Or do you have a recent one that was a big, like Randolph was recently done, right? I mean, do you have any?
Let me go ahead and look those up for you, Chip, and I'll provide those to the group.
Because again, I just want to reiterate that, and again, I have no clue, if the cost is 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever it is. But, if you're talking about a really old school kind of in an area, say, of South Arlington that we've all been talking about here for the last year or so, that could be knocked down, could be rebuilt, built bigger, what have you. I hope we have that discussion as part of this, just simply because, if it's say $5 or $10 million and a new school costs 70 or 80, there's obviously some reason to kind of move forward on that other path. Now, granted, I realize space is an issue, but then we just need, or the board needs to push, the school board needs to push the county board to find the space to do it, right? To house these kids. So again, I would just hate to do these projects and then have them limit something down the road because we don't want to look like we're not being as prudent as we should be because we're spending first on the HVAC, if that makes sense.
Well, Chip, I don't have dollars and cents at this point in time, but we will when we get this pulled together. But a full replacement of some of these mechanical systems is going to be significant because you're going to have to take out all the ceilings. You're going to have a lot of trim work. You're going to have fire code enhancements that will have to be done with regard to breaking through spaces and getting larger ducts in. and we will have to meet all of the current codes and standards when we do that. As it is not a maintenance project, that will be a new system. And you're looking at, with the air changes compared to even some of the current duct work, you're going to see enlargements that are significant on these ducts, which means there's sealing issues, there's clearance issues. You're going to find things that we find on all of our older projects, where we have plaster ceiling with tile ceiling with a lay-in ceiling, that are all going to have to be demoed and worked to get all of this additional equipment and ceilings and in locations and to make it all operable. So it is a significant lift, and I think the dollars and cents will be very informative for the decision makers in pulling this together and figuring out the direction that we need to go and what we can afford to do and how we can afford to do it. But yes, I agree, an underperforming school in capacity and space and classroom sizes, etc., may not be the best thing to do a full mechanical replacement once you see the dollars and cents. So we will be looking at all of that, and we will have to evaluate all of that with regard to how this gets presented and how it gets pulled together. But first, we got to finish pulling it all together.
Yep. Thank you.
Jeff, this is Mike in finance. To answer the question, Gunston was 11.5 and the Randolph project, this is just for the HVAC, Gunston 11.5 and Randolph was 6.2.
Thank you, Mike.
Stacy's got a question or a comment.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together, Jeff, and for this presentation. I really support the idea of doing, to me, this is a needs assessment of our schools, which I think is really a valuable, it's a really valuable study. And I hope, do you have a sense of, when looking at these, that there will be a school or several schools that will become apparent that they're a priority, that they need to be done sooner rather than later? And is there, I think we have to look at all of, I think in general, we have to look at our APS capacity, school facilities issues always in context, and sort of understanding that we have limited space, limited money, and that projects take time. and so I just it's more of a comment and then a question, but the comment being how, or it's kind of a question too, like, how does this prioritize when we still have 800 high school seats that there's no plan for currently, and around 600 middle school seats that there also is no plan for? How do we prioritize doing these HVAC systems within a very limited budget?
Yeah, I think just to respond, I think that in 34 years of doing these types of studies, the numbers do inform a lot with regard to decisions and direction. So we'll pull it together and we'll see where it leads us.
Well, I applaud you for doing it. I think it's a really valuable study.
Michael?
Yeah, thanks. It's come to my attention that we have a participant that in the Teams meeting that hasn't identified themselves. Usually I go ahead and I take attendance for minutes and for recording purposes, but I see that we have a Mantler, and I don't remember letting that individual in, which is fine. They can join the meeting. It's a public meeting, but can they identify themselves, please?
Yeah, she's commenting in the text. It's Christina Hedrick. She's been at a number of our last meetings, which is why I didn't ask. I knew who it was for notes purposes.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, because I usually don't see that in the minutes. So thanks.
Thank you. And just, Stacy, this gets to me, with all of these demands and the limited resources we're going to have. I keep coming back to how do we meet these needs? We need to be a little more creative in terms of, how we define seats, for example, maybe at the high school level. And so I look forward to getting input from the studies on, whether virtual learning can work for some students and whether we can gain some flexibilities there. Failing that, we're going to have some difficult decisions to make. And this county's not used to some of these decisions. The money's just not going to be there for all these needs. But I believe, Jeff, you're right. I think some of these numbers are going to be eye-opening. And, what occurred to me that it maybe does argue for maybe more economical to go one way than another because of these costs and these needs if they're prioritized a certain way. So again, thank you for doing that, and let us know.
If you can bear with me, I'll go through these other ones pretty quickly. I mean, as far as the 8 schools being studied with regard to kitchens, we're looking at Arlington Science Focus, Ashlawn, Barrett, Campbell, Carlin Springs, Drew, Randolph, and Swanson Middle School. 3 of these, we're looking at the security entrance upgrades. If we're going to do a kitchen in a building, we probably should do the security entrance at the same time to align with our current APS standards, and that's at Arlington Science Focus, Campbell, and Swanson. VMDO is working on these sketches, and we are working on the concept designs. They have presented actually the March 5th. We did get the plans. We've been looking at those. The remaining 4 schools by March 15th, and then we will be estimating those so that we have all of the numbers. Our target is again the end of March. With regard to security entrance cost studies,
Hold on, Colleen has a question.
Sure.
It's actually about the security entrances. You noted 3 schools, but there are several others who don't have the separate buzz-in. You get into the office and then you go beyond. What's going to be the process for identifying and getting those schools up to code too?
We actually have a whole list of every school. There are some that were in last year's list, and basically when the bonds are sold, we would have the funding for those, and I forget how many were on last year's list. They were the more difficult ones, so they get easier as we go, so they're less expensive as we go. But essentially, I think with this list, we will have identified all of them. And priced all of them so that they can be put on a list to get done.
And Heather had a question. I'll actually broaden it a little bit. When you refer to like ATS, Arlington Traditional, you mean the current ATS site, correct?
Correct.
So,
I refer to schools as they are named today.
Okay, thank you.
And then we are looking at just security entrances. And again, here we're looking at Hoffman, Boston, Jamestown, Kenmore, Langston, Long Branch, Nottingham, and Tuckahoe. These are a much more simple fix. They're similar to what we did at Drew last year and Montessori. With regard to adding some vestibules and entrances in, we would be modifying the vestibule with new finishes and walk-off mat, and we would be reworking the offices to make them function with an extra door within them. The only really oddball in this group, well, not oddball, but Tuckahoe, we couldn't do it with a vestibule because of the rotunda when you come into the building is very difficult. There's actually no vestibule there, and you walk from the outside right into the main corridor. So there we would be looking at creating a vestibule within the administrative office area, and you would literally come straight into the building from the exterior. and be in a vestibule within the office. Langston is even more of a challenge, and we worked with the Office of Safety, Security, Risk Management, and at this point they're looking at probably rekeying the entire building with the APS keyway, which they would contract out, add additional cameras, which they would contract out, and add additional card access points with local alarms and signage. And again, that would be contracted out. And those would all be proprietary, so they're getting pricing for that. And we will include that in our list with escalation factors. But with all of these in estimated and looked at, I believe we have addressed all of the school's security entrances that was asked about. So hopefully we will be there. And then the fourth area that we are looking at is the Heights Phase 2 study. And again, we're working on the options that were based on the board direction that Stantec has worked on. Option A is to provide the underground staff parking with 75 spaces and play field directly above. Option C was garage with 24 spaces and the artificial play above. And then we had option D, which was to fix it for now, to provide the covered walkway from 18th Street. And one was to extend the natural grass field to cover where the temporary fire station would be removed, and there was no parking in that option. And D2 was to provide surface parking with 20 parking spaces. The options are currently being priced by a professional estimator, and with board approval on Thursday, CBRE Heary would be on board to do the third-party estimate. And then when we get that third-party estimate, we can reconcile with the target date of March 26th to have those numbers together. So we are well on our way with all of the studies that we were directed to proceed with, and are still rolling. If anybody has any more questions.
Chip?
Yeah, I got a question on the last one, the Heights building study. Can you speak to why there was no option E or F or so? You know, Stacy just mentioned, you know, the gap of high school seats as an example moving forward. You know, why wasn't it some of this space looked at for a small bump out or addition to kind of, you know, we're moving seats into Wakefield, we're moving seats into Washington Liberty, you know, we're putting lots of seats, extra seats into those facilities, but why aren't we looking at this one?
Basically, we're working with the direction that the board directed us to move in. The flat floor garage was always intended that it, you know, if not ever not needed for parking, the intent was that it could be expansion space for the school.
Okay.
So that was always something that we had looked at because we are not able to put relocatables on this site.
Right.
But it would be a major project at this point in time to add additional spaces. You know, like building a wing, so to speak, onto the building.
Right. So it sounds like there is, if you were to do the garage as an example, you still have the option to, you said build on top of it. Is that right, Jeff?
No, it would be built within the garage. That's why we're
Within.
doing it as a flat floor.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else for Jeff? All right, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you.
Reports coming out the last week in March, huh?
As close to that as we can make it. It's a lot of work, and we've got a lot of people pulling in different directions. So, yep, that's our goal.
Thank you. Okay. What's next, Michael? All right, is Lisa available yet?
Yes, Lisa's joined us.
Here.
Hi.
There she is.
All right, Career Center.
Okay, so hello everybody. Sorry I'm late. I came from weekly meetings. So I am sharing some things that we discussed with the school board prior to John's leaving. I feel it's like the gift that keeps on giving. So many of you are aware that last spring when we were working on the CIP, again, the Career Center project came in significantly over budget. So our CIP does not include the 800 seats that had been in the CIP for some period of time. So we need to regroup on that. And we've had some recent discussions with the board that makes it clear that they still want to continue to develop the Career Center. And those discussions include the CIP direction, which was done, I believe in January, they adopted that. And in that they included language about providing space for the current Arlington Career Center students, but also doing some work to be prepared for whatever we're going to do with the addition, because we're sort of in this weird time frame. You know, we have this interim CIP and we have this, we don't typically do back-to-back-to-back CIPs, but our the pandemic had ended up resulting in a one-year CIP last year. This year we have a 4 to 6 year CIP, and I think that still is not necessarily clear that's what it is. But when we get back next year, we need to have that plan for those 800 seats for the growth that you're all talking about to address some of our needs. So, and then we also had the Career Center After Action meeting. And in that, the discussion around the Career Center site, again, conveyed that idea that the school board really does want us to move on this. So before John left, he put together a pretty extensive memo that sort of laid out some ideas to get the school board taking some next steps so that we could begin to move forward. And the idea was if we could define some things that would allow Stan Tech to come in and do some legwork, that we might actually be able to go into the next 2 CIP processes with more information ready. We'll definitely be able to do it for the one that follows next year, but can there be some things that we accelerate this year to get that process going? And so that was shared with the board, and really where it landed is the big piece is the visioning for the Career Center is has to be agreed upon. And the school board is holding a retreat later this month to dig into sort of the visioning process and are they okay with the goals of that work? That work was already planned as part of the IPP. It is very specific to what will be at the Career Center, who are the students served. It builds off a lot of the work that was done through the BLPC process and other processes to develop the ed specs and really redefine what the Arlington Career Center program is. At the same time, we have the team around instruction has also dug into, we need to define what our goals are for CTE programs, career tech education programs. So as Arlington Tech has grown, you know, we used to have about 900 seats that were split over the course of 2 periods each day. So 300 students would cycle in to access those Career Center courses. We have a lot of Career Center courses at neighborhood high schools, but a lot of those capstone courses can only be done at the Career Center when you want that hands-on experience in the labs in those spaces. So at the same time, we need to address sort of that CTE. How do we keep that accessible? Because it should remain available to all Arlington students. And that means actually getting, thinking sort of outside the box. And that work is taking shape and the school board's going to weigh in on it. The other steps, I don't think they are ready to discuss. However, that may come up as they get a better understanding of what's happening with the Career Center. So not a lot to sort of give on those Career Center decision points on the build out of the site. You know, we did say in this Montessori public school cannot be moved at this point in time. There's no place to move it. Even though the IPP is saying go K-8, there's no place to move it at the moment. I think when we look at what could go on the site, there's more flexibility with Arlington Community High School because those for adult students. And if we find other spaces, we could do some things there that then allow us to address the Career Center site. I guess I would stop there and ask if there's questions.
Anyone, one question, any parameters put around costs, budget for this, whether it's over the next 10 years or whatever?
For the 800 seats or for?
Well, we're talking about all these other things we're talking about for HVAC systems and, elementary school, middle school, high school seats. Is there any thinking of, well, this is the amount of money that may be available for a career center project? I'm guessing no.
Not that specific. So I actually think there's some related items that do get to this in a different way though, so I think you mentioned virtual learning and how does that play into that? One of the topics that we will be discussing with the school board at their retreat is sort of virtual. Now, next year, I would assume there will still be some element of virtual learning, more for those families who don't feel it's safe for their child to return because of something at home and stuff. So we're going to continue most likely to have to offer something next year. I think most of us hope we'll be back 5 days a week in person in a more normal environment, but there's still going to be some students who need it. The Career Center work as well, as we've been talking with Margaret Chung, Chris Martini, and Tide Bird. I think there's some virtual things that will be proposed in that as well. We talked about the challenge, and this group has talked about it over time, the logistics of getting from your neighborhood high school or from where you're in high school to the Career Center for those 2 periods of classes. And I know Chris Martini suggested that this is actually where virtual really could do some really interesting things for us. If we were able to align a lot of the high school schedules, so this is bigger than just CTE, but if we were able to align things even better, a student might be at their neighborhood high school for, some of the days when they have CTE, and then log in virtually and take that virtual CTE course at their main high school on those days, when the learning is not necessarily hands-on, but is more going through some of the, the more instructional work. But then on those days when they have labs, maybe going to the lab for the day, going to the lab for that, for the 2 periods and taking their neighborhood school classes there in some sort of flex space again. So keeping a virtual element to sort of allow this to happen without all the logistics that we have right now with kids getting back and forth from their neighborhood high school to CTE or to the Career Center. And, right now our evaluation of CTE has said that some families don't let their kids even take those courses because they lose a period getting to the Career Center, back and forth to the Career Center. So they lose out on some of the things that their parents want them to get at their neighborhood high school. So that's a piece. The other piece that has been asked by the school board, and probably many of you saw what was in the post this weekend on the announcement that Alexandria is making. What will there be some online learning for secondary students? We are definitely hearing from some families that it's working for them. It's not working for everybody, but there are some families. I had to deal with a parent last week who called in about a transfer, and really what they were looking for was a special ed accommodation. However, when talking to the parent and sort of teasing out the issues, the parent, if they had a virtual option, the virtual world was working so well for their student, they would take advantage of it. We keep hearing of some kids who really are doing well, and so we want to continue to offer it. How big will that be? I think it's right now. I think we still need to plan for next year and get through this year before teaching and learning can really get in front of it to think about a bigger plan. But I did hear the school board members are very interested, that what was in the IPP, I don't think was enough for them. Yeah. They don't want to see it in one high school. They want to see it accessible to everybody. And really, I don't think people are getting a concept of why they need space on the floor of a building. And so that I think is part of the next steps, is to figure some of those things out.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question, Lisa? You had mentioned, I think I heard the word visioning, and there's going to be this retreat, and some of the what ifs that you kind of put out there, like maybe moving the adult ed program, is do you have a timeline? I mean, when is the board going to kind of give you a direction, do you think?
I think they need to have, I think they need to have the retreat to begin to actually get themselves to a place where they can start thinking that way. That's my take on it. I'm hoping, before, by April, we get some, some of these things, that otherwise nothing will be in this CIP if we aren't sort of clear on some of those.
Okay, and I agree with you. So that's kind of what I wanted to hear. Thanks. Bye.
We have, Rosa, you had a couple of points here. Maybe it's easier if you state them.
Sure. So if I go to the top, Lisa had mentioned that Stan Tech, there was some additional work Stan Tech could do. And I didn't know if that was in relationship to kind of redoing the concept design or kind of bringing it up to the last comments about, various things that, where we ended with that last year. Or is it kind of moving past that and into sort of schematic design and moving the project forward, I guess. Does that make sense?
It's not about the Career Center addition. It's
okay.
I think that is, that is another piece that we need to get the school board ready for. But I think it's more about if we did think that, say, for example, moving the adult program someplace else, we need to define what the specs are for that program.
I see.
So we could begin to do some of that work because, that Fenwick, that site has, we want to be really careful how we use the land. It's an ideal site for a lot of things. However, we have to be very careful how we go into it. If we want to take care of some of the things that are needed for the current students today, there are some steps we need to take, because we've got so much on that site. It's sort of, how do you free up some things in order to begin to move forward while still leaving future space for it?
Okay. Yeah, I totally get that. And then you were talking about virtual and, potentially getting kids out of school or whatever, out of being in a school. And I was just suggesting, that, maybe the increasing the internship program that the Career Center has would also help to get kids, out of the school, and then therefore you could maybe have more students within a school because some of them aren't actually there. But then, and then my last comment. Okay. And then my last comment was a question about just in general, you talked about potentially 100% virtual, for some kids next year or whenever or whoever. And my question would be, how do you know that they live in the county? I mean, just having somebody have a residence in the county count? And if they're in Ohio and virtual, I mean, I don't know. I was just curious how that works.
That's a great question. And I know we adjusted our policy this year for families who live here but are being remote. And I actually just saw Fairfax just made the same adjustment to their policies to allow for it. I can't answer that question. I'd probably have to put it back to the folks who actually do that and in student services. But that is something to think about, on this remote piece. Long term, our policies shouldn't allow for that to continue once things are more normal. But, I know even staff members on, from APS who are in Fairfax County, but the kids are in Ohio because the family was moving here for this current school year. And it's just been easier to be where they've got a network of family, but they want to be in the school here. So they're coming back every 2 weeks to meet those requirements.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I don't know how you balance all of that in the future anyways, but I could see where, I mean, we have a great education, in our county. And, if you were to buy a studio apartment somewhere just to have a residence in Arlington, and then you actually live who knows where. It's just,
And I know people who do that. I know people who bought condos in Fairfax to get, for in case they got into TJ too, and then
Yeah,
sold them when they
true.
didn't,
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, I would trust that the practices that we used before will continue once we get back to a more normal. But again, I know there were concerns at that point in time with people doing the same thing as well. And so that's an ongoing iterative process to review those documents.
Okay. Anything else, Rosa?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Chandy had a follow-up, really relating to what partially what Rosa was saying about talking about whether you would whether there's a thinking of mandating either a combination of virtual and in person, or would it be given as an option for each individual student? Kind of what's the current thinking? And then yeah, so that's her main question.
I can't speak for sure, but I would assume it would be an option. It's got to be a good fit for the student. Each kid has different needs. And so I can't imagine us saying you have to do it. And that being said, I think actually we just did the world languages evaluation. And I look at some of our courses that are hard to staff and maybe the outcomes. And there might be, if you want to sign up for Chinese, I keep looking at that saying Chinese ought to be virtual Virginia versus APS because their results are better. We have small class sizes. They're really hard to staff. And so we begin to start to say in the program of studies, there may be some things that you set up for that can only be offered virtually. However, there may also be flex space within your school where you can do it in the building if you need to, or you can do it from home if that's a better setting for you. So it's almost like, the high schools a while back added that 0 period for kids to come in before the regular school day. So a period that started, I think it's 7:30. And a lot of kids chose to do it. And I think we're finding that students are actually giving us a lot of feedback and to their teachers on what's working. And they would continue to be sort of the driver of some of these things, not us saying, this, we would never tell who specific kids to go to one program if it wasn't a good fit for them, I would hope.
Okay, thank you. Chip had a question also. Sorry, I may have cut someone off.
Oh, it's me, Chandy. Lisa, I had just a follow-up question. I get that virtual is working for some students. I guess my question is that really what we should be offering? Because is virtual right for the social emotional development of students?
Again, this is not an area that is my area. I know I've heard Bridget Loft say probably not middle school unless there's some extenuating needs. Again, I think if it's extenuating needs, it'd probably identify those through an IEP or something. But for some high school kids, they were doing it before the pandemic. They are, our options, our alternative schools, do provide some of those settings that allow for more flexibility. So I do think there'll be some kids who want to take advantage of it. We're not telling them they have to do it, but it does allow us to sort of meet students where their needs are, as well as maybe free up a little bit of space. I don't know if we'll get a whole school out of it, but if we had 300 kids who chose to do it, we've already got a number of kids in alternative programs because those schedules work a bit better for them. I think seeing what we've seen this year, and it would probably be, and then for us to cut it off would probably send the wrong message as well.
Yeah, it makes me nervous that there's a decision made on something where there's no real long-term evaluation of how the quality of education everyone's receiving, if they've lost anything because it's online and we only have 4 days a week. And then really the social emotional development, like, if we grant someone that option, are we doing them a disservice? And I'm not an educator, but you as educators, are you doing them a disservice by just giving them that easy option out when for, life skills, they should be in the school?
So
It's
I would
just-
say
it's just
that's
something-
probably different than I would think they would be thinking it through. What you got this year was based on, we're in the middle of a pandemic and we had to create something. I know that one of the things that they talked about, which is why they wanted that space at the Ed Center, was really because of the social emotional, some of the connections. So that will be a part of any proposal. It's not necessarily what we've done because this happened and nobody was ready for it. There are some things that they want to make sure are in place. And that's why, next year it won't be ready, because right now we're still learning how to bring kids back and do the concurrent learning at the same time. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We have Chip, then Rosa.
Yeah, so I just want to echo kind of, I think what John was referring to earlier, that, obviously whatever is done at this site is going to have an impact on all the other sites, right? The sites that need HVAC, the sites that are more crowded than others, so I really think we need to, let our leaders know that one decision has a ripple effect on so many others that, it was a very good decision made not to proceed with, almost $250 million project here, considering the impact it has on everything else and all the other needs. And so that really needs to be thought about here. And it was kind of one of the reasons why I brought up the heights as well. There are all these things. These are all these other outside the box ideas that I think need to be considered. And hopefully, we're not just going to kind of go back to, what we've been doing in the past and kind of facing things one by one, right? When a teaching and learning discussion last week, a number of the folks brought up that the IPP seemed very narrowly focused, right? It barely included a discussion on neighborhood schools, which are 75 to 80% of our kids. It's all, a couple programs or option schools, and then, yes, some of the, things like virtual and so forth, which is, again, what I consider more outside the box thinking. And so there's just, there's a lot to think about here, and I just hope all ideas are really on the table. So it's just more of a comment.
Thank you. Rosa?
Yeah, and I just was kind of back at what Shandi was saying about the virtual and is it the right thing for the kids? And I've been struggling with this too. And I feel like I even went to the, county school mission statement and sort of read, okay, well, what is the purpose of school, of our school system, for instance? And certainly, the mission is to educate kids. That's sort of, the first line. And then they talk about some other things. But the question still comes back to, what are you educating them for? Are you just getting them so that they have a base level of knowledge, and it's like, we know that all of our kids know these things coming out of school, they can do this, or is it because you're trying to teach them life skills that they can use for the rest of their life, whether that means, is it a skill set that's a career, is it a job, or is it, the ability to be a resilient adult and be able to face things when in the future. And so I think all of these things are kind of related. And, if you hide behind kind of being able to do virtual, I think it is successful, but maybe it is a disservice because you're not helping or teaching those kids, putting them in an environment where they are, working with other kids and being able to overcome some of those, social issues, if there are social, issues or whatever. So I don't know. I've been struggling with it as well. And I just don't know, how I think, because if the goal of the school system is just to kind of say, okay, all of our kids know this information, then yes, then I think 100% virtual is the right thing for a lot of students. But once they're out in the real world, does that help them? I don't know,
This is why I think teaching and learning really needs to step up here. to the point that I would argue I would even reallocate some facilities money towards looking at this correctly, because the implications are huge. So Shandy's point about, we serving our children right, if it's done poorly, then no. If it's more of a matter of offering true options, I think it could actually help in some ways. An example would be a senior in high school who can do virtual and start doing an incredible internship program at Amazon, for example. So, I mean, there's just so many ways this can go, but it really needs to be thought out and overseen and managed well. We're not there yet. I agree, Lisa. We're not there. But I would say the sooner we can get some idea, some thoughts based on what's happened this year, the sooner it can potentially impact spending on facilities. And it can't be driven by facilities because it looks like we're just trying to save money on seats. It has to be driven by the experts on how to serve our kids where they are, as you say, Lisa. So I just still haven't seen enough coming from APS on what this year is what we're learning from it. Maybe some things we definitely don't want to do. Maybe some things we definitely do want to look at more. And I do think we just have to be we really should be open to being very creative. I had a school board member tell me 5 years ago, they said, the parents are the ones who are kind of stuck in the way of how high school used to be, if they remember. I'm guilty of this too, my high school memories. The kids are tend to be much more flexible. So I've tried to keep that in mind for 5 years. I'm here on a facilities committee. We're talking about building schools and rooms and HVAC systems. But I'd like to spend less on this and more on the teachers and the virtual opportunities and some of the creative ways we can really get better education for our students. Now, it's easy for me to say, it's really hard to do the studies. How does that impact kids longer term? But I just haven't seen as much that I'd like to from APS. So that's my personal view, being on a facilities committee. And I will, anything else on this? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion tonight, group. This is a lot of interesting things we're dealing with. Jeff, you're back up for the stormwater management at Reed.
All right, I'll get that back up. Hang on here. There we go. All right, that should be up there right now. This has been quite a journey. I've been working on stormwater at Reed now for more than a year. Started small and it has just kept getting bigger. But I think we're actually getting fruit from the effort, and it's been a very cooperative effort with the county. So it's been a challenge. Whoops, putting together the stormwater MOA, but we are there. The draft MOA is on the school board's agenda for Thursday. Action is planned on the county approved final of that on the 25th of March. The phase 2 design fees would also be approved by the board at that same meeting. The county board is expected to act on the MOA, the APS use permit amendment, and also zoning required them to do a use permit to build for the storm system to be built on APS property. And that is scheduled for the board on the 20th of March. So in between our action and our approval, the county board will be acting on that as well. We did hold a virtual meeting with the community on March 2nd. I don't know why I have March 20th on there as well, but pretty funny. The draft MOA is on the agenda for information to the school board, as I said, on the 11th. I don't know why I have that repeated. I've been having fun with the files. Anyway, the county board is expected. Yeah, everything is repeated twice. Don't know why. Anyway, the phase 2 design is ongoing with a target submission to the county in June. Sorry about that. Those typos. That's very odd. What I wanted to do is go through. This is the agenda from the virtual meeting, and go through just in case anybody has any questions with regard to what we're doing. But in addition to the MOA, as I said, zoning required us to do a use permit to defer the installation of the athletic fields and related landscaping elements for the school after completion of the stormwater detention vault. The school will, I want to emphasize, the school will be opening as scheduled. We just will not have the 2 rectangular fields, and the ball field would not be in place when school opens. We've worked with the principal and staff, and everybody is fine with that at this point in time. We will have the playground, we will have the hard surfaces, and the county has offered us the green space on the corner where the library used to be, should that be needed for the school to use. I don't believe that's being planned at this time, but they may need it and may want to use that, and they can. And as I said, the other use permit is for the county to put the stormwater or have the stormwater put on the APS site. Anybody who's not familiar with the work that's going on, you can see the school. This is the 4-story addition, Reed Elementary. You have the library, Westover Market. This is the area that we're going to have open for school, which is the playground and courts. And the stormwater vault would be in this blue area here. Essentially, it's designed for a ball field here, a rectangular field here, and then up on top of the sledding hill is another rectangular field that's planned. And then this is the old Westover Library site that could be used. Essentially, this is to alleviate the flooding concerns in the Westover area. It's also looking at initially, it was looked at for the stormwater that's coming from this direction. They're also going to be looking at the possibility of resolving some of these issues as well. All of it comes through Westover, and if you recall, the major flooding was in this area of town or of the county. You're going to hear phase 1, phase 2. The red boxes, the red bubbles are phase 1. That's the inlet structure where the water comes out of the 82-inch pipe into this stormwater structure, which is yet to be designed, and it will outflow at a measured amount back into the pipe through this outflow structure. And then phase 2, there'll be an underground vault. Again, that's being designed at this point. And the whole process was we needed to have, or schools needed to have, this work done so that we could finish all of the hard surfaces, so that when school opens, essentially we will have, oops, didn't want to do that. Whoop. We will have all of this area available for school use. Then this would be under construction. This would be fenced off from the school area. All access would be coming from Lexington Road. So we would have the pickup and drop off space that was designed, the parking that was designed. The fire truck access has to come through here over the half court and then the full court. And then this is the playground space that's here. And then this is that little wooded area up on the hill. So school will open with all of that access. The only thing we would not have is the blue area. So essentially when the school opens, we would have everything on this side of the little plus that's going around. So we would have the playground, we would have the hard surfaces, the connection between the neighborhood and McKinley would be available, the parking, pickup and drop off, and student access to the building. So we really will not be affected other than the fact that there will be something going on in this area here. Currently, the schedule is to complete phase 1 of the stormwater project. Will be completed with the completion of the building. So we want to finish that by the end of June. July and August, staff's going to be welcomed into the building as we bring in the furniture and all of that. We are still sticking to schedule, so we're going to have a couple months to get the building up and running and get the punch list items done and get all the bugs worked out of it before students show up in August, on August 30th. And then fall of 22, again, we don't know the exact time because it's all going to be dependent on the final design and the approvals of phase 2, but we anticipate at this point in time, earliest would be end of August. We would start seeing shop drawings and possibly some of the construction work starting, but it would definitely be September. Hopefully we would be moving on this project and getting it installed. And then the goal is for the winter and spring of 22-23 for the athletic fields to open. Again, and they're going to be seeded fields, so we need to make sure that they are established and rest for a while before they get heavily used to keep them from becoming dirt fields. Essentially, there is no impact on the approved design of the athletic fields. They're just going to be a little bit later. The construction area will be fenced off. Construction, parking, and staging would be adjacent to Lexington Street. There probably will be some street closures on Lexington because there's going to be a significant amount of dirt removed from the site. There will also be a significant amount of concrete, precast concrete structures coming in to the site to be placed for the vault. And there will be truck traffic, will be significant, and there will be construction noise. Again, we will be doing everything we can to minimize any impact on the school and the operation of school, as well as the neighborhood and community. But we felt all along that this is very important for Arlington and this community in particular to work together to deal with the dangerous stormwater issues that we have been experiencing in that area. So that was the presentation. Sorry about the typos. I don't know why it reproduced itself, but it did. Any questions?
I just have a question about how much of a difference do people make in Western?
At this point in time, we're looking at, I believe, 540,000 cubic feet of water storage. Based on the models, it will be significant. Will it be perfect? Will it eliminate all things in worst conditions? Probably not. But in most conditions, it should significantly make an impact based on the modeling that's being done.
Okay. Was the fact that we were building the school going to make the issue worse?
Actually, our site is probably, without this, our site would be releasing less water onto the county than it had prior to our construction project, just because of the requirements of the stormwater for a construction project. With all of our infiltration basins, et cetera, we really did reduce the water. And if you recall, one of the big things is we really were not adding any additional impervious area. We actually it was a very minor modification or a minor add. It was not significant.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Jeff?
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Hold on. We have Steve's asking about why not put it in a synthetic field.
These, again, it was never designed as a synthetic field. They are small grass fields, and I believe when we worked with the BLPC, they wanted what they had before, which were grass fields, and the sledding hill and everything that was there. So that's the direction we went. These are not competitive fields. These are recreational neighborhood fields, and it's, I think, as much a park as it is for the play that goes on there.
Any other questions? Okay.
Hey, John, it's Michael.
Yep.
I'm sorry to bring this to your attention now, but I tried to send you some correspondence just a little while ago regarding the last agenda item that we have on here, which is the boundary.
Yeah. So just something about postponing that till April.
Yeah, I mean, if that's okay with you and Colleen and obviously the rest of the committee, I think that the planning evaluation will be able to get a better sort of grasp and handle to have this discussion with the group later on.
I think that's okay. I think Colleen may have some thoughts. Maybe we have a few minutes. Maybe we can talk about a couple of things. But Colleen, did you have anything to bring up?
Yeah, thanks, John. You know, I think as we look at the multiple boundary processes that are coming down the pike right now, the thing for the FAC to really consider is how we can be a constructive partner in the boundary process and support its improvement. Having gone through this a couple of times now, it's painful in different ways every time, and I know that the goal is always improvement, and I think Lisa and our team are acutely aware of that, and I do think, as we've talked about throughout the whole night, we're going to have a lot of choices that we have to make as a community, and boundary changes are probably going to have to be part of our life, because we're not going to be able to build our way out of any increased capacity or increased enrollment. So it's just something I think the FAC that folks need to think about how we can play a supportive role, because we've played a few different roles over time in working on boundary processes. So I look forward to seeing what Lisa and her team have, but I did want to just put that bug in folks' ears to think about.
Yeah, so I would like to follow up. I appreciate that, Colleen. I think that's a very good suggestion to the group, and maybe that's something that everyone can sort of and in their leisure think about and come back in April with maybe some suggestions, and we'll see what planning and evaluation can also contribute, because you're right on. This is something that we won't be able to build ourselves out of. All these ideas and discussions we've had tonight are great, but bottom line, it's a lot of money.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. Does anyone have any thoughts on this particular topic? It brings up great emotions when we're in the middle of them. And we have a few minutes now if anyone wants to bring some thoughts on lessons learned, how to do this best going forward, and how FAC can be most supportive. The one thing I come to, and it's something we struggle with a little bit, is we and the other committees sometimes get information a little bit later in the process than we would like. And I know there's reasons for that, but I think one thing that the board's going to have to decide on how to use FAC and other committees is, maybe do we get information earlier, maybe even if it isn't been fully vetted by staff or even looked at by the board. There's arguments both ways, but I know I'm hearing from many of the members on this committee that we wish sometimes we get information earlier. I personally think we could help the discussion, whether it's boundaries or other things, if we get information earlier in the process. That's really a board decision. But I do, I'll be honest, I'm going to raise that in our year-end report to the board, that for us to really be more helpful, the more information we get earlier, the better. So that's kind of my view. Sometimes I think that the train has left the station when we're talking about these things, and it's too late other than to have some marginal impact. So that's one thing I plan to bring up, along with the fact that we have some big decisions to make, and I haven't really yet seen an appetite for us to make those decisions. I'd like us to make it intelligently rather than kind of knee-jerk at the last minute. I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm just saying the reality is, just look at how much it costs to do Gunston. I think it was $12 million, almost $12 million HVAC for Gunston. That's one HVAC project. I don't think we even did, it was a replacement. It wasn't really an upgrading. So that's just one thing. So that and the Career Center, building seats, we have big decisions to make. And I think we have a big role to play. Almost, I hope the board lets us help with that. So that's my views. Anyone else have any thoughts before we close for the evening? The only thing I'd add is, I know over the years I've talked to members about how can we have impact, and all I can say is the next few months are going to be important. This CIP process and planning for the future does give us an opportunity to really be part of the conversation. So I recommend that stay engaged over the next few months, and then it's going to be a little bit of a sprint, which frustrates me a little bit, but CIP is going to happen within a month and a half, basically. So I'd like to change that in the future, but for now, that's what we've got. Anyway, a few people have given their thoughts. Rosa, yeah, about getting early in the process. Chip, yeah. So I know a few of the members have been pretty upfront about this. That's something to discuss with the board. That's all I have. I'll stay on for a few more minutes. I want to thank everybody for attending and for great questions tonight. And thank you to the staff for all the work they've done. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so you know, I'm going to stop recording now, John. So if you want to stay on, okay?
That's fine. I'll stay on. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
Oh, John, this is Sarah. How are you?